So again, I'm going to push back on the idea that Newtonian gravity is consistent with a geocentric universe. It isn't. It doesn't even explain. It doesn't explain doesn't explain the precession of Mercury. It doesn't explain gravitational lensing. It doesn't explain time dilation. Doesn't explain muon decay. It really it fails on a lot of different levels. But on a terrestrial scale in everyone's everyday life, yeah, it's a very valid tool because what people are doing usually aren't isn't precise enough for the effects of relativity to really creep in. Now, you've said that essentially, I think you've said that uh, you claim that we progress kind of through a philosophical. But now I want to wait on that. The other thing I want to say is more towards uh, yes, as far as every revolution or revolution or scientific revolution that I am aware of, specifically in dealing with uh, physics or astronomy and cosmology, yes, the person who put it forward initially was ostracized. We see this with Copernicus and his spheres against the church. We see this with Galileo and his house arrest. We see this with, as you rightly pointed out, Newton or Einstein was not taken seriously in the beginning. Newton wasn't taken seriously in the beginning either. Um, but and they were eventually proved correct. Well, not proved correct. Sorry, their ideas were eventually accepted because the preponderance of evidence showed them to be their ideas to be the best description. And so I fully believe that GR will in fact someday be superseded. And I hope it is, because you're right. It doesn't explain, there is no coupling between GR and quantum mechanics. And so eventually it is going to have to be superseded. That's how science works. That's the scientific revolutions. I recommend reading either Karl Popper or Thomas Kuhn on these subjects. In terms of going back to the philosophical bias again, when you think of consensus, what I'm hearing, and I could be wrong, what I'm hearing is that you think that we're just accepting things, that we are just basically be given information from our forebears, and we're like, okay, that's cool. We're
Yeah.
not. We are doing observations which, to quote paraphrase or quote Newton, we are standing on the shoulders of giants. We are basically building our current understanding on their past understanding. And yes, there are going to be crises that test our current understanding. But if you're an honest scientist, you're going to go where the science leads you. And when we say that we have a consensus belief that the ether doesn't exist, it's because there is no real evidence to suggest that it does. Nicholson Morley, essentially, that's the null result. As you stated, there are only two possibilities: the Earth is stationary, or the ether doesn't exist. And so, like as I said, Mach took that and said, no, the ether doesn't exist. And Einstein eventually came about, and there was some playing around. Well, Lorentz and Poincare had some ideas, but they lacked any kind of physical meaning. But it was until Einstein's GR that you actually had a physical mechanism for why you would expect that null result to occur.
Wait. Oh, specifically the null result. I mean, I'm like I said, like first, right, Henry Poincaré is the one that came up with basically the whole core tenet of relativity, and Einstein took it. Like the whole entire bending and warping of space time, that whole thing, that's Henry Poincaré. He came up with that. When you're saying like the physical mechanism, he didn't offer a physical mechanism. He also took that from Lorentz. He got the Lorentz contraction, which of course, if you contract the length, and you have to like change the time, right? But there's still not agreement on the physical mechanism. So I'm confused what you mean by that. What length contraction? What's the physical mechanism for that? Like what causes length contraction? Saying different frames isn't a physical mechanism. And Einstein was very particular. He said it isn't just an apparent subjective effect. It must be a real physical effect. So what causes length contraction? I heard you bring up muon decay. That's the only alleged evidence for it, pretty much, and that's laughable to me. That's intrinsically electromagnetic. That's where length contraction came from. That's where time delay came from. Oliver Heaviside, electrical wires, everything's electric. So like, what do you mean by he was the only one to offer a physical mechanism? Because Henry Poincaré, for example, or you could even go to Lorentz's ether theory, both of them were ether theories. Henry Poincaré was an ether theory, and if you compare Einstein's relativity and Henry Poincaré, they're like experimentally identical, effectively. It's just one has an ether. They threw and also one more thing. It didn't prove there was no ether. It proved either the Earth is stationary or the stationary ether believed at the time couldn't be true. Specifically, it wasn't that there was no ether, right? Like even Einstein himself said that. But I'm really curious what you mean by he offered a physical mechanism for the null result, because he didn't. He said actually that he didn't know what it would be.
So the physical mechanism is that we travel through space and time, which obeys the equivalence principle, specifically for SR, that the speed of light is invariant depending on inertial reference frames. So what Lorentz was saying was he believed that the reason why the null result happened was because of literal length contraction due to ether frame drag, which doesn't make any sense, because what that would, if there is ether frame drag, then that would rob energy from the Earth system, and it would cause the Earth to spiral into the sun, and we'd all die. Obviously, we don't see that. So the null result is actually a case of the fact that the speed of light isn't changing. That's why the null result is the way it is. It's not length contraction. It's SR. And the physical mechanism was then later on developed by Einstein or whoever, by GR, and to say that, the Earth, the universe is composed of mass energy. It's a fabric which we refer to as space-time, and the curvature of that space-time due to the presence of mass energy, that is what dictates all motion.
I was muted. Yeah, special relativity was proposed to explain Michelson-Morley, and according to Einstein himself, and it attributes the constant speed of light, so there's no absolute frames of reference in. And to explain it, you do have to invoke a physical length contraction, because there's going to be a difference in the distance traveled by the light perpendicular to the motion of the Earth. As to whether or not that it's detectable, that's the absolute frame thing, so that's SR, like you said. But there's going to have to actually be a physical shortening in the reference frame of the sun, which is the motion they were trying to detect. That's the reference frame they were utilizing to get their predicted fringe shift, right? 30 kilometers per second around the sun. So that means that from the perspective of the sun, from that frame of reference, the apparatus has to contract and time has to change, right? Time has to slow down. That's just a made-up story. There's no evidence for that. And muon decay is begging the question with electrical phenomena, begging the question of how many things are out in space. I don't even believe that, but say I did believe that. It's just all intrinsically electric, just like the original length contraction that was observed by Oliver Heaviside was based on the way that current interacts within wires. So that's all that it is. That's all length contraction can be. That is a physical mechanism. It's electric. Einstein didn't offer a physical mechanism. Specifically, I've read many papers where it explains that. People debate to this day what the physical mechanism for length contraction is, and there is no answer. Basically, it was just it's an unfalsifiable claim. Like that, you're claiming that things happen that I can't test. That's all there is to it. Like, I can't tell that anything's contracting because I'm in the same frame of reference that it contracts. I can't tell that time slows down. And then, of course, you can get into the cesium clocks and halving, like, oh my gosh, dude, 1/1000th of a second, and we can't even get them like to sync up on the runway. Everything is so shoddy and sketchy, and I don't really know why. I don't know why the ether is so terrifying. At least I used to not know why, because we have free space impedance. We have an electric constant and a magnetic constant in a vacuum. We have the Casimir effect. We actually even have repulsion in the Casimir effect. Casimir repulsion effect. So why is it that people aren't acknowledging the ether? And that's when you find out, because if there is a substantive ether, the earth cannot be going around the sun. So then what I did was went and looked back at, well, what's the evidence that proves we're going around the sun? Right? Because there has to be substantial evidence here that's making us completely ignore the ether, because that's what I started with, was Tesla, ether, electrical field theory. These people can't define magnetism and think there are virtual particles. What a bunch of idiots. That turns into, why are they not acknowledging the ether? That turns into, oh, because that would mean the earth can't be going around the sun. And then you get to, what's the evidence that we go around the sun? If all we have is aberration and parallax, that stuff can just happen in the sky on its own. That doesn't prove that I'm moving because the stuff in the sky moves. There's no evidence that we're moving around the sun other than assuming it.
That's where we're going to have to disagree. Basically, Kepler's laws tell me that we're moving around the sun. Until you can show me or just tell me that without just saying it doesn't, Kepler's laws do predict planetary motions. We rely on it all the time. If you're using stellarium or what have you, they invoke Kepler's laws. So I don't understand where you're coming from and saying that there is no evidence. And like I said, stellar parallax and aberration, they're just two. You also have binary systems, as I've said. I'm sure there are others that I'm not that's not popping in, but because I haven't really looked into it. Now you use the word terrified. So again, when you say that people are terrified, what you're saying is the scientific community is terrified of the idea of the ether. And the reason I think you gave was because the sun or the earth would be what must mean that the earth is stationary.
Yep.
What are they terrified of?
The earth being stationary.
Why is that?
That's what I mean. You're a creationist, right? So it may not click with you.
I'm a Christian.
Right. So then you believe that this place was created. And so that has no qualms in your worldview. That doesn't change anything. Like there's the creator of the Bible made this place, right, for you. Most of these people are not. They're atheists. And like Edwin Hubble specifically calls it the horror of a unique position. Now, it's not really fair to act like that's irrelevant. He's the one that saved your model. He saved heliocentrism conceptually. He saved it. Because it was refuted. He saved it. I mean, I know you said someone else saw it. He saved it. That's why it's called the Hubble constant. And he didn't. Well, okay. Agree, disagree. He's the one that everyone. That's what they told us. They told us he saved it, and that's the answer. You said that for you it doesn't matter because you know that you can view it as if that's still amazing and the creator made it. Well, here's the actual difference. If we're a tiny speck of dust in an ever-expanding universe of nothingness that's expanding faster than the speed of light into nothingness, 46 billion light years away, and we don't really know what everything's comprised of, and we're just a tiny speck of dust, and 84% of the matter in the universe we can't see, and everything makes us look like we're in the middle, but we're not. If you believe that we're in that position via the Copernican principle, you could easily believe there's no God. It's just random odds. Do you agree that if the Earth is in the center, that necessitates that someone placed it there?
I don't think so, because you could just say that essentially the argument would be what atheists or people who don't believe in intelligent design, they would just say that the physical laws dictate that we see the universe as we do. If somehow it comes into view that the Earth is in fact the center of things and ether exists and all that, then you can just use the same argument of that nature just made it that way. Now, in terms of, I'm kind of going to reject the concept. I'm going to kind of reject the term creationist, because for me, the term creationist means young Earth creationist, which I am not in any way, shape, or form. Now, but I don't understand. So again, being in the field, I know I've experienced sort of the religiosity. Religion really never comes up in science. When we talk at conferences, we don't talk about God. We don't talk about, yay, God is cool, or God doesn't exist, or God sucks. We just don't talk about it. So
Of
therefore,
course.
I don't understand where that terrifying aspect comes in.
I
And
just
again,
clock.
it seems like you're trying. I think I've heard somewhere that the heliocentric universe is attempting to hide God. Who is wanting to hide God and why?
So again, I'm not invoking some collective, malevolent, deceptive scheme to hide God. What I'm saying is people have a philosophical bias against God. I don't know why that's hard to understand. Of course they do. They have for all eternity. Actually, atheism is a modern intellectual plague. But if there is a creator that put the earth in the center of everything, then that means there's a creator that you're accountable to, which means that maybe you can't be living the way that you are. That's just common sense. Well, why are people atheists in the first place? Because moral accountability is terrifying to them. That's the words that Edwin Hubble used, not me. He called it a horrific position. We must avoid it at all costs. He said that the position of the Earth being a central position, can never be disproven, but we must avoid it at all costs. We'll only acknowledge it as a last case scenario to save the phenomena because we have no other choice, and we must avoid the horror of a unique position. And Stephen Hawking effectively tells you the same thing, only the way he phrases it is that you can't actually in any way establish that we're going around the sun, that the Earth's not the center. They're equally valid in every way in terms of physics, but we choose to believe that the Copernican principle is true on grounds of modesty. And that's hilarious because, of course, Stephen Hawking was one of the most arrogant atheists ever and used to talk about boldly how God doesn't exist. God doesn't exist. God doesn't exist. And then the day came when God said Stephen Hawking doesn't exist. Right. So I don't find it to be particularly accurate that these people don't care at all. They do. They have a philosophical bias against a creator. And I'm not making, my argument is not, oh, there's a God, they're scared. If you want to know why I think that they're avoiding it, it's a philosophical bias. People are weak. Man is weak. They're afraid to not conform. The weak find contentment in the consensus of ignorance. And who wants to be the first person to come out there and try and say it? Most of them don't even see it. But what we've established, though, like if the only evidence is aberration and parallax, that's just the sky moving. The sky can have a certain cycle moving. You said something about binary systems. Okay, well, I'd have to hear what that is. I can almost guarantee it's just an assumption that it's based on us moving again. And there's no physical evidence. All the empirical evidence shows us at the center. It shows us at the center, and I can't even get people to acknowledge that we could be at the center. Like, and that's why I find this it's like a spell. Do you agree that it's an equally valid coordinate system?
So, all right. So we need to. So in that sense, there are two ways to look at geocentrism, as it were. You can look at it in the Ptolemaic system, which is that the Earth is fixed in space and everything revolves around the Earth. Or you can look at it in a relational way and basically just say it makes no difference to say, all right, the center of the universe is the sun and everything revolves around it, or the center of the universe is the Earth and everything revolves around it. I would agree on that second one. Yeah, those two are equally valid, but it doesn't change. But in that scenario, it doesn't change the fact that Kepler's laws are a thing, that we can explain parallax and aberration the way we do. So yeah, I will acknowledge the second, but again, without the evidence and it's not even without the evidence, you have to explain why Kepler's laws work. If the Earth is at the center, if everything is revolving around the center, you have to explain to me why Kepler's laws work.
Is that the main hiccup here?
They objectively do.
That's the main hiccup, is you think that Kepler's laws couldn't work on a geocentric model?
That's one of them, yes. That's the
Kepler's laws can be satisfied with the neo-Tychonic system, though.
I would have to see evidence of that.
I can send it to you. I can send you the math. I'll send you the math.
I'll also send you a plethora of papers that are precision tests of gravity, which show that EGR actually is a thing.
What?
So there's a paper by Clifford Will in 2018, and he summarizes basically your standard reading that you would need to understand GR. And he lists textbooks, he lists journals, and he cites a lot of different papers going from scalar tensor theories to the PPN network to the tests of the weak equivalence principle, so forth and so on.
The equivalence principle, doesn't that, it says that the Earth can be at the center though. So like it's very simple. Einstein himself said, no, you can't do any test that can prove the Earth's moving around the sun. And what's not well, this is something else that the average person would never be told until they stumble down the rabbit hole of wait, are they lying about the Earth? Like he proposes special relativity and gives a constant speed to light, explains away Michelson-Morley, and then finds out, oh, I need to go on to GR. And he says that one of the main reasons he came up with GR was to explain Mercury's perihelion shift, right? Which he didn't. He didn't, because we ended up getting more and more accurate measurements of Mercury, and it doesn't explain it. Because that just proves that all he did was make his theory based on explaining the current data, the current number they had. It isn't an accurate depiction of physics at all. It still doesn't work. There's Mercury's anomaly, still doesn't work. But the point is that what's not going to ever be told is he did that to basically salvage the heliocentric model in the face of the Michelson-Morley experiment. And that's what he says in his own paper, Relativity, Special and General Theory. That's what he says. He says that it was very perplexing to scientists why we got a null result. It should have been decisive. He said that Lorentz proposed what saved the solution, or saved, offer the solution to the problem, and that's Lorentz contraction, time dilation. And he points out that the alternative would be us not moving around the sun. That's so special relativity. He explains away Michelson-Morley, and then you get to GR, and in GR he flips the script. Everything changes. All of a sudden, there actually isn't technically a definitive speed limit to light, and I will be covering that in my I have Einstein himself saying that according to the laws of general relativity, we cannot assume there is a definitive limit to the speed of light anymore. And Einstein said that himself. You've never heard of it. I had never heard of it until a week ago. No one on my channel has ever heard of it. That's interesting. And what he ends up having to conclude is that the Earth could be stationary, that the Earth being geocentric is a valid coordinate system. After all this, saving the heliocentric model, he comes full circle back around to GR, which says equivalence principle, covariance principle, the Earth could be in the center. And then you take that with Mach's principle, you're like, okay, well, and actually what happened was Mach corrected Einstein because he only applied it to like the stars, the sun, the moon, and the planets. He's like, wait. Mach's like, Einstein, you didn't apply it to all this stuff way out there. That's what really happened. He's like, you're not accounting for the stuff way out there. He does it, says, oh, look what would happen. If that big of stuff that far moving that fast around us, then we would actually be able to see results on a stationary Earth. So I know there's a lot, but why is that not ever told? Why did I have to go look into reading like dozens of papers to figure that stuff out? Why is that omitted?
I don't know who omitted it, but what I will say is, again, I don't deal in quotes. I deal in science, and GR says that the speed of light is constant, and it is 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second. I don't know what Einstein was talking about. He may have been drunk. I don't know. What I do know is that saying that that the speed of light is no longer that relativity says the speed of light is no longer constant is patently false. That is not what GR states. Now there is some discussion fairly recently, as from my understanding, and these are when I say discussion, I mean active fields of research that are asking the question: is the speed of light invariant with respect to time? Now, in the sense that did the speed of light currently is 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second. Does that mean that it was 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second a billion years ago, 10 billion years ago? Will it be the same a billion years from now, 10 billion years from now? We don't know.
That's not science.
So that's the idea. That's something that is being questioned. Now, you keep saying about saving things and all that. I don't think they're saving the heliocentric universe. What was saved was the fact that they looked at Michelson-Morley and they got the null result, and the prevailing idea was that light needed a mechanism via which to travel to one side to the other. The null result got rid of that mechanism. basically, or got rid of the assumed mechanism of ether. So what was saving was the idea, or what was saved was the idea that light travels from one place to the other, that Maxwell's equations are invariant with frame, I believe it is. And so that's what's being saved, not the heliocentric model, not the fact that the Earth is revolving around the sun. And finally, I'll say that, if you talk about relational mechanics and all that, apparently there are problems with relational mechanics, but even if you take relational mechanics at its face value and say that, yes, the Earth can go around, the sun can go around the Earth, that isn't what you think it is. Again, that's basically just a reference, that is a change in reference position. It still means that the Earth is expanding, or the universe is expanding. It still means that the Earth is a smote of dust in a vast cosmos. It doesn't mean that the universe is small. It doesn't mean that the ether exists. So yes, you can, in some certain sense, think of the Earth as the center of the universe, but that's because of the cosmological principle that states there is no specifically special place to the universe.
Yeah, but again, go ahead, sir. I bring that up to show that people that claim that the pendulum and the gyroscope prove the Earth's rotating is patently false. It's wrong. They don't understand their own implications of physics. Newtonian mechanics claims that there's a fixed background of space, claims that an object will continue in a straight line until an external force acts upon it. Einstein said no fixed background of space. Object will fall straight, but in a different reference frame, be falling in a curved geodesic path without a force acting upon it. If you take Newton's application and you say, oh, well, it's the background of space is not fixed, rather the entire cosmos moves around the Earth, that would generate, as opposed to what he invoked, which were fictitious Coriolis, centrifugal, and Euler forces, you would get real centrifugal Coriolis and Euler forces, and you would get a net centripetal, radially inward accelerative Coriolis our centripetal force towards the Earth, causing what they call the pendulum, causing what they call... Now, I don't even agree with all this, because I don't agree with distances, I don't agree with the vacuum, I don't agree with the sphere. I don't even agree with the sphere. I don't agree with the curved, the convexity and the symmetry of the claimed Earth. I don't believe that, because the evidence actually refutes that. So either way, my point is just to point out that it's dishonest. Well, the current representation is dishonest. When they say that the pendulum proves the Earth rotating, it doesn't, according to your own model's framework of physics. It's just, why is everything so grossly misrepresented? There's such an immense amount of ineptitude, and I'm not claiming to be some genius that figured it all out. You just have to go find it because it's hidden. And right here is an example. This is an introduction to the theory of relativity by Rosser, okay? Because this also was a surprise to me. I'll be covering it in my Relatively Speaking series, episode 3. But in the theory of special relativity, we used one coordinate system for the whole of space. And using the principle of the constancy of the velocity of light, one could, in principle, it's really hard to read these words, but use light signals to synchronize all the clocks at the rest in the coordinate system. This is not possible in a rotating coordinate system. One must change the words is not legible, of space and time and the whatever of the centrifugal gravitational field. One cannot use one single coordinate system for the whole of space, but one must use infinitesimal. Why does this look so bad? One must use infinitesimal local. It might not say infinitesimal.
Infinitesimally small local areas.
Maybe that's what I say. Yeah. Infinitesimal local, yeah, where everything's flat, but then we can just pretend it's curved on the big scale. Infinitesimal local coordinate systems and allow the metric to vary from point to point. Relative to the stationary roundabout, the distant stars would have a velocity, can't read the character, and for sufficiently large values, blah, blah, blah. So to come down, here's the point that I want to make to you. In general relativity, it's possible to choose a local reference frames in which, over a limited volume of space, there is no gravitational hold, and relative to such a reference frame, the velocity of light is equal to r. However, this is not true when gravitational fields are present. In addition to the length of rods and the something of clocks, the velocity of light is affected by a gravitational field. If gravitational fields are present, the velocities of either material bodies or of light can assume any numerical value depending on the strength of the gravitational field. If one considers one rotating roundabout as being at rest, the centrifugal gravitational field assumes enormous values at large distances and is consistent with the theory of general relativity for the velocities of distant bodies to exceed the speed of light under these conditions. general relativity itself, and I have a quote from Einstein. I'm not going to let that one out yet because I'm doing in my show, but it's a misnomer that GR has the speed of light. At great distances, it doesn't. And this would show that the Earth's moving, or the Earth. Do you agree also that a literal interpretation of the scriptures says this? I don't invoke that as evidence ever, but I don't like. Would you still be able to do what you do and kind of adapt the way you interpret what you see if the Earth actually were in the center? Like, what would that do to how you proceed?
So if the Earth were not from a relational standpoint, but in fact you could invoke an absolute frame of reference and the Earth was the center of that frame, if that could be shown to me or proven or what have you, then my conception, then I would have to start asking questions like, why did we get it that wrong for so many years? How is it that the math works now, or the math worked before but doesn't seem to work now? Or actually, this is probably more likely, is in order for that to be true, something revolutionary has to be discovered about physics, which can explain why previous to this discovery, relativity seemed to be the right, relativity, quantum mechanics seemed to be the right modes of thinking. So that's how it would go. In terms of the Bible, and I've said this on multiple occasions on a couple times on my channel, I am not a Bible literalist. I do not take the Bible literally. I think it is a parable. It is divinely inspired. It is not divinely written. And I'm probably going to get a whole lot of hate for that, but oh well. But regardless of that fact, to me, science and religion are completely separate. They ask completely different questions. As I've stated, I go to Bob, my big orange book, if I want to know, how galaxies are going to collide. But I go to, where did I put it? I go to this if I want to learn how to behave, say, in flat Earth Discord servers. So one for me is basically how to describe morality and how to describe the human spirit, and the other one is to how to describe the physicality that we believe, or that we live in. So, and the last thing I will say, just kind of going to the back, is, and you've said that, why isn't relational mechanics? Well, first off, actually, if you don't believe it, then why are you espousing it? Because that is not the mainstream narrative. That is not what science tells us. That is, from my understanding, it has been looked at and has been refuted by what science really tells us. So why do you propose it if you don't even believe in it?
What are you saying? You can send me something that supposedly refutes it. I've looked for that. There's no specific rebuttal at all for it.
I would have to ask Icon Science and a friend of mine, Eric E., because they are the ones who basically let me know about that. But
that relational mechanics had been refuted. I would love to see it. But okay. I kind of said that in the last answer, but the reason is because the current model is grossly misrepresented. A lot of people run around trying to intimidate other people for seeking the truth about where we live and asking questions, and they pretend that this tilted, wobbling, spinning cartoon ball in a vacuum is so definitive that you're intellectually inferior to dare question it, when in reality I have researched much more of it than they probably ever will. And in reality, if you just an actual understanding of the physics that staples the model together necessitates you admit geocentrism is a valid interpretation. And so I don't like that. I like to expose people that lie and try to intimidate other people. Certainly whenever it comes to a bunch of people saying, actually, I take the scriptures to mean what they say, and they get ridiculed as science denying cultists, when in reality, scientism is a cult. And so that is how I actually feel, and I don't mean it as any personally directed disrespect, but it is a cult. To say that the earth is 4.5 billion years old, cult. The Great Unconformity shows that that's not the case. There's over 1.7 billion layers of sedimentary layers missing, and we just pretend that doesn't matter. Every single one of these theories has something so grossly wrong with it. Evolution, abiogenesis, can't even get origin of life underway. Oh, it's not what evolution is. It literally is. That's what you're trying to do, is get rid of God, explain it with evolution, explain abiogenesis, explain the first process. This spills over into physics of the Earth as well. The idea that we're a tiny speck of dust, ever-expanding universe, Big Bang, the little dust particles from the sun coalesced and made the Earth. And I could go on. I don't want to just like talk your head off, but the point is that a lot of this stuff is just completely fantastical theories people made up, and they change over time. They say, oh, you proved my theory wrong, let me change my theory where it's unfalsifiable now. That's not science. It's laughably not science. And then you go back to empirical evidence that shows that we're not moving. I just wish that people would be honest about it. The reason that I have to go through the time to read all these papers about things I don't even believe in is to go out and correct the misnomer, the misrepresentation, to go correct people within their own paradigm. That's why I have to invoke Einstein. I have to teach him, no, he said no terrestrial or optical experiment could ever prove, because we have people running around claiming that a sensitive enough gyroscope can detect the orbit around the sun, right? It's the level of misinformation that supposedly represents the globe model and the specifically the heliocentric model is astounding. And I have to correct it. It's a philosophical decision. If you think it makes more sense to you that we're just a tiny speck of dust in an ever-expanding universe, and you want to acknowledge its philosophy and that all the evidence can be interpreted either way equally, then that's okay. But that's not what that happens. That doesn't happen. People pretend there's only one way, and that's just clearly not the case at all. I mean, if aberration and parallax is all we have, I don't know.
As I've said. See, all right, now I got to really stop you, because you've now basically called me a cultist, which I find to be highly insulting, actually, because of the amount of research that I've done, because of the amount of work that I've done, because of the friends that I have in the community who have done the work. They were not accepting anything at face value. You say that you want to bring out liars. You have made multiple statements tonight that are patently false. I'm not going to call you a liar. I'm just going to call you incorrect. Now, basically, to call us liars, I find that to be, again, a little bit combative and possibly arrogant. And also, I don't care what people on Discord say. The Foucault pendulum, yes, it can be used to describe or to indicate that the Earth is rotating. Again, I've read the section of it in that relational mechanics book. And essentially what he's saying is, again, it is not able, as far as I understand, it is not able to determine the Earth's rotation in an absolute sense. Not that the Earth isn't rotating. It cannot determine that the Earth is rotating and the universe is not, as opposed to that the universe is rotating and the Earth is not. So to say otherwise is a gross misrepresentation of what they were saying. And again, that isn't what we that the science believes. That isn't the narrative or whatever you want to put forward. Relational mechanics is not the science that is taught and worked on or worked by. So it's not a philosophy. This isn't a philosophical bias. We are looking at evidence, which you have claimed doesn't exist. I don't know why you are claiming it doesn't exist. But we are looking at evidence that does exist. Again, we're building on the shoulders of giants, and we're using that to find better and better things. The fact that we keep changing the story is because science is an evolution. Science changes based on empirical evidence. So if it were a cult, wouldn't it be better if it were stagnant? I mean, if we wanted to make sure that people believed what we believe, if the atheists out there want us to forget God, and oh, by the way, believers on this planet far outnumber atheists. So I don't know where this atheist group is coming from, but believers on this planet far outnumber atheists.
Barely nowadays, actually, but yeah, okay.
There are billions of believers, not Christians.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Who's they?
People that claim to believe in God, that's what they say. But when you know that the Earth is the center of everything that exists, that becomes very real. It's not just a cute little story that you kind of believe in case it's true. because worst case I'm wrong, but if I was wrong and ignored it, then that could be dangerous. No, it becomes real that the earth is the center of everything. Children are told atheism is growing in numbers faster than any other time in history. So I don't know why this would even be like. It's because children are being told these pseudoscientific stories. And when I said cult, I mean, I don't mean it as a personal attack or something, but it is a cult. If you go against if you go against the fact the Earth's 4.5 billion years old, you get ostracized and attacked and ridiculed. But I just dunked all over that with the great unconformity, 1.7 billion years of missing sedimentary layers. Not even an agreed upon answer at all. When you say that's not what the science believes, that's an oxymoron. Science doesn't believe things. That's not how science works. Science is based upon empirical evidence, not consensus. Consensus is consistently wrong. Humans are consistently arrogant, think they know more than they do. They get in their little groups of their colleagues and they think, okay, well, we're the smart special boys, right? And that's what normally happens. I'm not saying that about you. I'm saying about it in general, and it's well known that this happens, and we can just look at the pandemic to prove it. People died because of it. And so I basically, and we can't even get into detail about that. That's how you know there's nothing there that's being suppressed. But overall, the point is that I'm explaining that it's pretty objective that these mainstream beliefs are taught as if they're definitively proven, and they're nowhere close. And you say that, well, if it was a cult, wouldn't it be stagnant? It is stagnant. It literally is stagnant. They can't unify the cosmological, local, and quantum scale for how long now? How long has it been? Over a century. When did they first discover that there was a dark matter discrepancy based on the current gravitational models? Over a century ago. How long ago did Newton propose a theory without any physical mechanism? 500 years ago. Like, it's not even close to being progressive. The fact you have an offshoot of a bunch of people making up random stories within the presupposed religious framework, I consider it basically a religion, because if you challenge it, I get there's no way I could even, if I went to school, aced everything, accelerated right through the school guide degree, and started trying to put up, I can't publish papers based on what I believe. They'll never get published. And I know for a fact that they won't. I would be stupid to go and try and do that, because you have to fit into the presupposed narrative that almost always props up materialism. So I don't know how it is that we're not. Why do you think it hasn't become stagnant? Because in 1930, how long ago did we discover that the vacuum had energy in it? We've known that there's been vacuum energy for how long? Quantum foam, the Casimir effect, electromagnetic vacuum, free space impedance, the dielectric and magnetic constants of magnetic permeability inside of a vacuum. This has been known for a long time. Why can't they acknowledge that that's there? Why can't we unify everything? How are we, I guess in closing of this statement here, is what I don't understand is, how are we not stagnant when we can't even unify? We can't even come up with a theory of physics that would apply at all scales. That shows that we must have some presuppositions somewhere on some of the scales that is holding us back. That's what the actual logical response is. There's an assumption that we have that's wrong. So we need to boil down the paradoxes that don't make sense and we don't have evidence for. Like the particle wave duality, that's stupid. Nature doesn't have dualities. Nature doesn't have duality. Something can't be two contradictory things at the same time. The universe can't be accelerating faster than the speed of light into nothingness. Nothing cannot exist. Everything can expand from one single point, but there is no center. That doesn't make any sense. These are paradoxes. There can't be 500,000 consecutive immense odds of coincidences stacked on top of each other, but it all came from nothingness. So how are we not stagnant? I guess I don't understand. I know from your perspective, we're not stagnant because you have people that are trying to figure out certain questions. I get that. Right? There are certain question marks people are trying to figure out. But in the grand scheme of things, we are quite stagnant. No one can explain how to unify the scales because they have to adhere to a certain model with a certain gravity, and therefore no ether. Ether debunks heliocentrism. And that's like screaming Satan in church. You're not allowed to go out and propose the ether. So.
All right. So I would refute your idea that no one can, that it's saying Satan in church, because you have obviously found people who have said that the ether exists. If that was like saying Satan in church, then you wouldn't be able to find those papers. What it sounds to me is that you're expecting, you must have a much higher opinion of, or rather more higher expectation of scientists than I think is reasonable. You basically want us to have solved everything in order for you to believe any of it. Science has radically changed, radically evolved. You go from the Greeks, who thought that the Earth was stationary, motionless, and that the planets actually revolved on crystalline spheres, oddly enough, made of ether. You go from that to Copernicus, that said, no, actually get rid of those spheres. Actually, the sun is at the center, the Earth goes around. That is a fundamental change. Then you get to you go to later on, where if we go to cosmology, well, go to Newton, he describes gravity in a certain way. We get to Einstein, he describes it as something completely different. The basic underpinnings of classical mechanics are wrong, such as absolute space and time. From a cosmological scale, we go from, again, a very small anthropomorphic centered construction to something that is vast. You know, when we talk about in the 1920s and 1930s, just prior to that, that was the Hebert-Curtis debate. And that debate was whether or not the universe was 100,000 megalight years in size or something far larger. Hubble came around and he basically used Shapley's method against him to argue that no, the Andromeda galaxy is 2.5 billion million light years away. The universe cannot be small. So to say that the universe is not, or that science is stagnant, I think is disingenuous. It is just, again, patently false. This isn't a this is, I don't know how I can say this any differently. Is that, again, when I hear you say they, I hear people on Discord. I'm a part of the scientific community. I've seen it done. I have done it. We do not just accept what has come before. And if you go through the university and if you go and get your degree and what have you, and you can demonstrate that ether exists, you will get paid attention to if your proof is or if your idea has substantial weight to it, if we can have observational evidence to support it.
But you don't need that with the stuff in your model. You don't need that with dark matter. You don't need that. That's what I'm saying. There is blatantly a double standard. If you propose something that goes with the currently accepted status quo, you can theorize fantastically. You can make up all kinds of stuff. Oh, it's actually baryonic matter. Oh, it's unicorn forts. Or and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to that idea. I'm saying that is just a made up idea. But if I make up an idea about the ether, that doesn't count. So like I can list off, I have a whole list of things here, right, that go directly in the face of the current cosmological model. And every answer will be, you'll know more than the average person, which is why I do greatly appreciate you coming on. And I'm not in any way trying to be disrespectful to you, but there'll be things you don't know the answer to on here, maybe, right? And at the best case, some of the answers will be, we don't know. But that's okay. That's how science works. As long as you're looking for the heliocentric model's answer.
I'd be okay with you, though.
Do you see the double standard? Like, I know that we don't know everything. I know we're going to always have to learn things. That's fine. I don't expect science to already know everything. That would be ignorant. I'm perfectly fine with us discovering new things and having question marks. That means you're getting closer to figuring out the truth, is when you figure out how wrong you were. But that's not the narrative that the average person is told. That that whenever you looked way out and then the earlier formed galaxies, they're way too formed. The way too formed. It was just swept under the rug long enough for someone to come up with a reason why. Actually, never mind. It does work with our Big Bang assumption, and that's what I'm saying. I want to give you more talking point now because I wanted this to be more like hyper specific about things, and I know I've been talking a lot, and you're the guest. But what do you think about this? What if I toss you subjects, and then you can tell me if you have an explanation for them? Is that okay, or is that too much?
No, we can do that. But I just want to lastly go to your point of dark matter and all that. These aren't, as I said before, these aren't stories. These are hypotheses. So we see missing matter, which we call, because astronomers are oh so creative, dark matter, because we can't visually see it. We just call it dark matter. It's not a problem for GRs per se. If anything, it's a problem with the standard model, because it could potentially, hypothetically, be be particles that are not baryonic. But like I said, the vast majority of people in this field do not believe that it's unicorn farts. They believe that it is baryonic matter that we just haven't seen yet. So with ether, again, if you can provide that as a hypothesis and you can show that it actually has merit, then the scientific community will listen to you. Yeah. So what? Let's see what you got in terms of specific examples, and I'll try my very best to answer them honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I like empathize with you, man, because like, but at the same time, it's like I don't feel bad for your position, right? Because yeah, like I can come ask you tons of questions right now, but you have an easy out. All you have to say is that's how science works. So Witsit thinks if he finds one thing wrong, it proves all of cosmology wrong and all this stuff. It's just, you know, you always have the consensus on your side, but I do empathize with you having to stand in on behalf of it all. Let me read some of these super chats real fast. This guy said, appreciate you coming on. Have this discussion, Professor. Much love to all. MKE Matt, thank you, brother. We'll read the super chats in just a second. We talked about dark matter, right? Because I don't want to make you stay way longer than you maybe want to or something, but we did talk about dark matter. Yeah. And you believe the most probable thing is really dim baryonic matter. And for those who don't know it, you don't think that, one of your colleagues thinks that. Okay.
So you have just a. I don't want to interrupt your question.
No, you're totally fine. You're totally fine. I don't.
So again, I hate the acronyms, but the two broad camps are machos and WIMPs. Machos, really luminosity, low luminosity, typical ordinary objects like white dwarfs, planets, and so forth. And then you've got the WIMPs, which are weakly interacting massive particles like neutrinos. Neutrinos are baryonic. They are part of the standard model. So that half of WIMPs and machos believe in real particles or particles that we have seen, that we have direct evidence of. It's only a small it's only a subset of the WIMPs camp that actually are invoking particles that we haven't seen yet. And I think that's really what people in CERN are trying to figure out. Now I've completely forgotten the question. But for me, I would lean toward it being neutrinos. But again, you have the problem that in order for cold dark matter to be real, or to be the explanation which the models seem to, or the observations seem to point to, then neutrinos would have to be moving very much slower. So, which we have not seen. So it is still very much of an open question. But my personal belief that is neutrinos, and we just haven't seen a slow neutrino yet.
Yeah. So speaking of, I guess at one point they said neutrinos went faster than the speed of light, and then they came out and debunked that with a different study saying that they always go like right at the speed of light.
Yeah.
But so the question is, if according to relativity, the closer you get to relativistic speeds, or the speed of light, the more contraction you suffer, right? Where in theory, of course, matter could never go the speed of light. It would be energy. So if it's going faster and faster, closer to the speed of light, then it's going to contract more and more and more. And I guess at the same time, as you get towards the speed of light, you effectively have like an exponential limitless increase of mass if E equals mc squared. So how could you have those two things coexist? I'm pretty sure that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So I don't know. So that would coexist, that if the way that you formulated it, the way that would coexist is that the density of the object changes. But I know that in my cosmology textbook, this author doesn't like the idea of relativistic mass, of describing it as the mass gets infinitely dense or infinitely high. He believed. I actually need to reread that. I need to figure out why he, what he actually or they actually have to say on the subject. But I would imagine, and this is a guess, I would imagine that it's not that the mass is really increasing, but the mass is changing into energy. But that's a wild guess, really. But in your construction, which I think there are scientists who would disagree with that construction, in that construction, it would have to be that the density of the object gets higher.
Yeah. Just yeah. That, I mean, okay. Well, we have neutrinos that supposedly go that fast, so we should observe this happening then, right? I mean, that they claim that neutrinos do have mass, but of course, some disagree. I mean, and then there's different types of mass, and then there's. Yeah.
Well, with neutrinos, the problem with the mass is that we believe that the neutrino has mass. Now, the kind of problem that we're encountering is that so far with our observations, the best we can do is tell you what the highest mass that it could potentially have. We don't know what the mass is, but we know that it cannot be more massive than X. But so far, we have not been able to determine that what the specific mass of a neutrino is. But we do expect it to be really, 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 really tiny.
Yeah. I consider it pseudoscience. It's the ether, and it has different states, but they'll catch up one day. So I know that sounds really arrogant. I'm just saying that the materialism and the devotion to heliocentric model makes it where they can't invoke the ether. And I have the easy way out. I know that there is an ether, and so I'm able to explain a lot more. It's not really like a personal. It's not a personal.
Sorry, I just have to push back and say that I don't think there's a lot of materialism in astronomy. I've never seen it. You talk about Hawking being a raging atheist. I don't know. I actually didn't know that. I do know that Neil deGrasse Tyson is, and he's a dick. I don't like him. I know that
Carl Sagan, Lawrence Krauss.
Carl Sagan was an atheist, yes, but he had at least he had respect for people who believed. But yeah, you're right. He was an atheist. But
Lawrence Krauss. You could go all day.
You have somebody else that's I can't think of the name. Lawrence Krauss. Yeah, that asshole.
That is brutal.
Like him either.
Yeah.
But in terms of everyday scientific community, we don't discuss God. We don't discuss materialism. So I don't know where that's coming from.
If everything has to be explained within like materialistic explanation, that's material. I mean, yeah, you may not talk about it, but I mean, okay. There's an ether. But agree to disagree. You'll never be able to unify the scales until you do that. We talked about dark matter a little bit. It's undefined. You would agree for the audience to wrap that up, like no one really knows what it is. It's never been directly observed. The assumed effects of it's been observed. If relativity or our current understanding of gravity is true, then dark matter or something that we're calling dark matter must exist. Basically.
Yes. So we have observational evidence of missing matter, which we call dark matter.
If gravity is correct, right?
If gravity is correct. So,
yeah, right.
Yeah, and we don't know definitively. We have not settled on the most probable cause of what dark matter is.
Or even what? Yeah.
But we do believe that it exists in one form or another.
Because everyone believes in general relativity as of now, right?
Because general relativity has been tested many, many times and not been falsified yet.
Except
explain everything.
Except for the quantum scale.
Yeah, can't explain it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's paradoxical. Like, wait, real fast. About relativity is something else I've never got a good answer to. So, and even Tesla said this about relativity. So, like, space and time, space being the absence of matter, a coordinate system of length, width, breadth, description of an area or volume void of matter. the area between the matter in a vacuum. With what it's just a concept of emptiness, and we define it or describe it with math. And then we have time, which is actually the conceptual quantification of passing and change, or specifically change and motion based on the sky. But we say it's linear, even though the sky is not linear. Long story short, these are concepts. So if you have time and space, because we could all come tomorrow and be like, actually, there's 120 seconds in a minute. And that's a concept. That's not legitimately physical. We can't conceptually change physics. So with all that being said, how can you attribute physical properties to conceptual abstractions? How could you say that space and time can physically bend and warp and dilate? Like, how can space bend and warp because it cannot have physical properties because it's a concept? Like, that's called a reification fallacy.
So space is simply length, width, and height. That's it. It has nothing to do with being devoid of matter or energy or what have you. It's simply length, width, and height. That is observable. This has length, it has width, that is height. Space. It occupies, it exists. It occupies this area in my hand.
That's a book, bro. Like you're describing like a real physical book, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can take in space time describes reality. It describes an area or volume, rather.
I don't understand that. That's what I'm saying. Like, can you hand me length, width, and height? That's a book. Like
which is described by length, width, and height.
Yeah.
Now you're right. You were pointing out that time could be changed, and I'm reading a book on the history of cosmology and the history of astronomy, and the Mayans had a different conception of measurements of time to the Babylonians, but they all were self-consistent. Specifically, they were looking at the timing of Venus's rising or certain stars rising. Anyway, but the idea that there is the idea that there is a movement from one event to the next, to the next, to the next, that is what's embodied in time. And so kind of going back with space is that it doesn't matter what you want to, it could be furlongs for all I care. But the concept goes into the unit. But the reality is there is a destination. There is separation between this point of the book and that point of the book, which is space, which is in this case length or width or height, depending on how you want to define things.
Okay, sorry. My headphones were kind of tripping for a second. Yeah, you can't have... Yeah, okay. Math is a description. Math is a language. It can change based on what we say it is. It's like super hot in my office. It's crazy. I can't attribute physical properties to conceptual abstractions. That doesn't make any sense to me. I could say that this is 6 inches. I could then describe it in centimeters. Nothing changed. We could agree that there's 16 inches in a foot tomorrow. That's just a description.
Define it that way, yeah.
So then what you're saying is that it's dependent upon our conceptual denotation. It's not actual. Like, what if I measure my table at 6 feet tall, or long, right? My table's real regardless of whether or not I measure it, regardless if I change what the foot is. It's real. I get that there's something real that we are describing when it comes to length, width, but not when it comes to space. It's real when we are measuring actual, real, physical things. So, and even Tesla said this: the curving of space cannot be correct for the simple reason that space cannot have properties. And he's correct. You can't attribute physical properties to concepts. And you should ask yourself, why did Einstein feel the need he had to do that? Well, there could be nothing physical. Or Michelson-Morley debunks the Earth going around the sun. So he had to say that it has physical properties, but there's really nothing there. That doesn't make sense to me. But I guess what I don't understand is how can space, which is the area void of matter, if this has a certain length, that's a pin. That's a pin, though. Like, now give me this long space. Well, then what's there? Nothing's there. It's there. Nothing. There's nothing. Like, space is the area in between the matter, right? Like, if I have planets in space, well, it's planets inside the space. So how can the space, which is nothing, and time, which is how we describe change in motion, like, how can they be physical? How can they, like, physically interact with the material world and bend and warp? I don't get it.
So this goes down to definition. Physics does not state that space is nothingness. Space is reality. It is basically anything that can be defined via three coordinates: length, width, height, radius, or phi, theta, whatever three coordinates you want to use. Space is that which can be defined by said coordinates. It doesn't matter what is in it. So to me, when I conceptualize space-time, I like to use the word fabric. I like to basically think of, and this is probably wrong because I can't conceptualize things in four dimensions, but what I think about is just the literal reality of space. It has, again, I'm kind of repeating myself, but it has a length, a width, a depth. I can travel through it. And as I travel through it, time progresses as seen through just events unfolding, like wind blowing through here or what have you. So I know I'm sure that's not a satisfactory answer, but that's how I conceptualize it.
We'll have to agree or disagree, brother.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's the definition of reification fallacy, misplaced concreteness, where you take concreteness and place it on a concept. Space is nothing in and of itself. It's merely the absence. It's a privation. Like a shadow is the absence of light, right? So, like, is a shadow a real thing? Well, yeah, we can see shadows and we can define space as length, width, and height, but a shadow doesn't exist without light. It's the absence of light. It's nothing in and of itself. Its existence is dependent upon light. So that's a privation. Space is the ultimate privation. Nothingness. That's an idea. That's an example of a privation. Privations cannot have physical properties. Einstein was forced to do this to save the heliocentric model. It can't have substance, or it debunks the heliocentric model with Michelson-Morley. So he just made it up.
Again, space is not the absence of things. I don't know how to say that any clearer, but space is not. No one in physics defines space as the absence of anything. Space has stuff in it.
Okay,
it has like so. It has books. It has electrons. It
has stuff in it. So the stuff is in what?
Reality.
So space can't be the stuff in it. The stuff is in the space.
Yeah, stuff is also space. It has space in it.
What?
It has the book is space. It has a length, it has a width, it has a depth.
That's a book, bro. That's a physical book. That book is in space.
No, it is part of space.
That doesn't even make any sense. Like, I don't know what that even means. Like,
that is what science tells us. That is what.
Okay.
So I really want to impart that physics does not say that space is empty.
Physics doesn't say things. But I hear what you're saying. I'm trolling. But I don't know what that means. If you're contradicting yourself, frankly, you're saying it doesn't tell us that space is empty. Okay, then you're saying that space is something that can be filled, which means that it's not the stuff that's filling it. It's what's being filled. It's emptiness. It's nothingness. It's what is filled up with stuff, which means it can't be stuff itself, which means it can't have physical properties, and neither can time. And so this is the fundamental on the face of it. Relativity is inadmissible logically. It doesn't even hold weight logically.
So I don't say that space is filled up, because you're right. That would indicate that there is something outside of the things in it. No, it's the term space is the universe. It encompasses everything in it. Its dimension, in this case, space are the dimensions that the observe. I don't know. That's the wrong word. The length, the width, the height. So space is everything. It is the universe. Space time is everything. It is not a construct. It is a description of the fabric of reality. So
okay, agree again. Agree to disagree. There is no fabric. Just saying it's a fabric is like begging the question.
TR states.
No, I know you guys want your cake and you want to eat it too. But just like Tesla said, space cannot be curving for the simple fact it cannot have properties. And in fact, the equal and opposite reaction would cause curved space to straighten out. But everyone we can disagree with that. Like I'm trying to think of
death rays or death lasers. That was a little bit weird.
The government basically insinuated that was in fact a real thing that they confiscated, though. So maybe death rays aren't so crazy. Yeah, Tesla was different for sure. Okay, so we covered dark matter. There's a list here. I don't want to just like bombard you. You've already been on here for a while, but we have the cosmological constant problem. What say you? Defend your model.
I think I've already gone over that. In that,
okay,
yes,
sure, kind of.
There is a valid problem with how we determine the age of the universe, in either through the Hubble constant or through the CMB. But as I also stated, neither of them disprove, debunk, or go against the idea that we live in an expanding universe that expanded from a small point. And just as an aside, Big Bang Theory, and this is a common misconception that I've found, Big Bang Theory does not say that we came from nothing. The Big Bang Theory has nothing to say about the point of creation because of the fact that relative GR cannot be coupled at present with quantum mechanics. We have no description of what the universe looked like prior to t to the negative 43rd seconds, the Planck era. In the Planck era, we have no idea. Mathematics will tell us that it will shrink down to a singularity, but then you have folks who are doing loop quantum gravity who say, no. Actually, math can tell us that it actually gets to a very small, but not infinitesimally small size, and that the universe rebounds out and we had a universe prior to it. So the idea that the Big Bang tells us that we came from nothing isn't accurate.
These people basically think they are God, right? Like you're going to tell me what happened before this universe existed, just make up that there was another universe. I mean, whatever. Yeah, technically the Big Bang actually says there was a pre-existing energy. I mean, it's updated since then.
Wouldn't that just be one universe? I would look at that as one universe. The universe is just changing.
An all-creative pre-existing energy? Like, why don't you just say God? Because these people are atheists,
I can't
they hate God.
I can't take the integral of God.
Yeah, that's why you maybe shouldn't be trying to answer questions that you can't. I'm not even going to say, like, how about let's figure out what's happening here on the quantum scale before we try to answer what happened at the beginning of time. But what I find very interesting, though, is that none of that works. You can't apply relativity to a singularity at all. Like, period. It can't be applied to a singularity. So I don't even know why we're talking about relativity at all in that context. But one thing I didn't understand with the cosmological constant, you're saying that, yeah, there's this huge discrepancy, like with Hubble tension. It's like...
But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, well, those are kind of tied together. You have the amount of energy needed to accelerate the universe. So like the accelerative rate of the expanding universe, and then the amount of energy needed for that. Yeah. But either way, how is that not, like, are you saying that it's accelerating differently in like different places relative to the Earth? Because that would completely destroy the heliocentric model. If our Earth were looking out and we see, oh, the stuff closer to us has a different accelerative rates than the stuff further away, why is it specific to where the Earth is? Is this going to be one of those, like, someone's going to come up with a new theory about how we observe things, makes things look like they accelerate faster when they're further away?
I don't think so. I don't see the accelerating universe. Maybe I'm misunderstanding your question, but
They,
the the tension between the ages of the universe as derived from Hubble law and the CMB does not in any way imply that the acceleration of the universe is not isotropic, or that it differs in directionality.